So this is the second week that I'm doing on a series on discovering the well of joy. And someone said to me, "How are you doing?" And I said, "I'm doing all right, actually." And they said, "Actually?" He said, I thought, gosh, if I'm doing joy, I better be joyful during the service itself. But it's the second that I'm doing. And last week, we spoke about the importance of, if you're looking at discovering the well of joy, you've got to find the entrance to the well. Where is in our life the entrance to the well of joy? That was the first question that we addressed last week. And I talked last week about the entrance to the well of joy as being not selective about the feelings we have and the feelings we don't want to have. In order to discover the well of joy, you've got to decide not to be selective about our feelings. Because when we're selective about what we're willing to experience, the focus of our attention is on working out what we want to feel and then steering our lives towards circumstances that give us the feelings that we want to have. It all becomes, what do I want to feel? It leads us to keeping an overview of our lives that looks at the weather generated by different circumstances, and then we navigate our way to sunny climes. But the problem is with that it takes us away from what we're feeling right now. It takes us away from what we're feeling right now. By not discriminating between what we like to feel and what we don't like to feel, we choose to feel the feeling that we're having in the present moment. And when you choose to feel the feeling that you're having in the present moment, it opens the well of joy. That is the beginning of it. We're at the entrance to it. We choose our feelings. We don't try to feel something else. We just go with what's going on at the moment. And when we do that, then suddenly, whatever the feeling, we do become okay with the feeling. We accept it completely, whether it's being sad or whatever it is, we accept it. And with that acceptance comes peace. The clouds part and we find ourselves at the opening of the well of joy. And in that acceptance, in the peace of being okay with what we're feeling, what you then sense is the possibility of joy. You can just feel it when you're okay with what suddenly that possibility is there. And then we descend within ourselves towards that well of joy. And what I was saying last week, the next step is to put our attention on the space of non-being. And if you want to know what non-being is about, then you can actually hear last week's talk. If you look in front of you, you'll see some red little things and some blue ones. The blue ones are for putting yourselves on the mailing list, and on the red ones, you can see how to access last week's talk. And we looked at the idea of being with non-being. That most of the time we're with our beingness and we're thinking, I'm feeling this and I'm feeling that. But if you can just distance yourself and be in a place of non-being, to enter non-being is to allow ourselves to become detached from all notions of being and arrive within ourselves at a place of non-being, which is truly to be in the present moment, not to be taken one way or another. We go to a place within ourselves from which being is generated. That which gives us the capacity to experience. We put our attention on our ability to experience rather than just the experience itself. It sounds a bit complicated, but it was easier last week, I promise you. Doing that in 2 minutes isn't easy. And so within that, we're in the place where we have the capacity, because we're just in that capacity, the capacity to experience joy. This whole process of uncovering the well of joy is therefore really about where we put our attention. It's about, in our lives, where are we putting our attention? We have to first put our attention on whatever we're experiencing. That's the beginning of it. And we choose that. We accept our thoughts and our feelings and the emotions that we have. And we have our attention on that. And then that opens us to the portal of the present moment. By being in the present moment, we enter that well of joy. And then we descend into it by putting our attention on the whole concept of non-being, to the capacity by which we experience rather than the experience itself. And this shows us the extent to which we have to be intentional about the way we live. We have to be intentional about the way that we live. If we're just going along with the prevailing current, we'll be washed away by whatever that particular current brings. And we do, Heather talked about the still place in the turning world. We find ourselves thrown around in that turning world. But if we're intentional about how we're experiencing life, then we choose what we are to experience. And that's what we mean, in the chapel we talk about, people say, what's your purpose in the chapel? And I say, well, our purpose is to work out together, how do we live our lives more skillfully? How do we live our lives more skillfully? And one of the key ways of living our lives more skillfully is to be intentional about the way that we live. We choose the circumstances that we find ourselves in, and we choose the experience that we have of those circumstances. And when we choose what we have, what is, then that brings us serenity. And from there, we go deeper by focusing on that capacity to know rather than just going along with what we think. It's all intentional. And this is why meditation is so valuable, because it helps us develop the muscles that enable us to go within, to choose what we're experiencing. Because when you're doing meditation, sometimes unwanted experiences and thoughts come up. And you just have to choose that experience. It gives us the possibility to choose that serenity. So that's where we sort of got to. And, in creating and discovering joy, having got to that point within us, the next step is to put our attention outside ourselves. You've created an understanding and acceptance of what's going on. And in creating joy, we then put our attention outside ourselves. Having dealt with the thoughts and feelings within and come to a point whereby we experience serenity, it gives us the ability to look out into life with a clear eye. And through doing that, we're able to connect with all that's around us. We can connect with nature, with people, with art, activity. And this is where we find the exaltation in living that we call joy. In looking outside ourselves, that is where we find the exaltation in living that we call joy. Because joy is a function of connection. It is a function of connection. Now, there are shortcuts to experiencing joy, but all of them involve a connection outside ourselves. You might fall in love with someone. Wow, joy comes bounding through. It is about the connection we suddenly find with that person. That's where that comes from. It might be music that moves us to joy, but it's a connection with those sound waves. We're fundamentally and deeply connecting and resonating with those sound waves. Or it could be a work of art. Again, we're connecting with that work of art, or being in the zone in sport, or in work, or when we're creating something. All these things that bring about that experience of joy come when we forget about ourselves and come out from within and connect with that which is without. We move from the preoccupation we have with ourselves, our involvement with our thoughts and feelings, with our problems, with our lacks, with what we think about things, to a connection with that which is around us. Because joy is a function of connection. We're suddenly not alone, but we found a connection with that person, or that work of art, or that music, and we see ourselves in it. Because joy comes from the realization that we are not separate, but we are all connected. Joy comes from the realization that we're not separate, but we are all connected. And it's a premonition of the bliss that comes when we experience a unity of consciousness, when we find that we're not only connected, but actually that we are one with all of creation. That is an experientiable thing. And with that experience, if anyone's had that experience of being fundamentally connected with everything, there is an amazing release of bliss and joy. It's the experience that people call enlightenment. One unity of consciousness that expresses itself in all parts of the universe. Each of us is an expression. It's the theory behind it. Each of us is the expression of that one consciousness. I am that one consciousness that the universe is made out of. I am that one consciousness expressed as Nicholas. This idea that we are stardust, that we are the universe made conscious of itself. I am that unity of consciousness experience as Nicholas. I am, and you are expressions of that consciousness as Bill or Linda or Eric or whoever you are expressions of that consciousness. And our joy is from connecting with this consciousness that each one of us is a part of, making a direct connection with that consciousness through someone or something else, like falling in love. We are one person. People often say that. Oh, we are one. And the marriage ceremony is about becoming one person. We connect at the deepest level. Like looking at the Mona Lisa and seeing her soul. Like being moved by a piece of music and feeling that we're one with that music. Or a dance and feeling that we are one with that dance. Like hitting a tennis ball and feeling that something is coming through us and we're part of the game that is much larger than ourselves. Joy is a function of connection. And the joy that we call bliss is when we realize that we're connected to all things. Everything else is just a premonition of that. You feel like the joy starts to come up, and it is a truth that we're linking into. It's what the Bible calls the joy of the Lord. In Nehemiah, it says, "The joy of the Lord is my strength." It is in that connection. That is the joy of the Lord is my strength. At its deepest level, this is the experience of the kingdom of heaven within us. This is fundamentally what it's all about. An ultimate interconnectedness with all things. The realization that we're part of a greater whole. And to experience this is to experience bliss. And we experience a part of that joy every time we make connection with something which is outside ourselves. And we feel it rising up within us. But to do that, we first of all have to get over ourselves, which is why we have to do all that acceptance of our feelings, our thoughts, our circumstances. And then we enter into the present moment and go deeper by letting go of our very being and entering into that non-being. And from there, we're able to come out of ourselves and experience the joy of connection. And as I said, this can happen suddenly in key moments when we meet an old friend, and through circumstances with them, that joy arises. However, if we are to cultivate that undercurrent of joy in our lives, it has to be more intentional. I mean, you can have these moments, but what we're really looking for is to have an undercurrent of joy in our lives, a fundamental experience of connection through all things, whether they be good or bad. And for us to live like that, we have to cultivate that joy, which is what the whole aspect of spirituality is about. It is absolutely about cultivating that joy. That's why we think it's odd when you see some people who are very spiritual, tend to be, you look at them, they're gloomy. I mean, no. I mean, it's about cultivating that. We have a definition of spirituality here, given to us by Rowan Williams, who was the last Archbishop of Canterbury. And his definition of spirituality is that spirituality is the cultivation of a sensitive and rewarding relationship with eternal truth and love. That's his definition. It's the cultivation, so it's an ongoing thing of a sensitive. It's about a sensitive feeling and rewarding, the joy bit, rewarding, and it's a relationship with eternal truth, the nature of reality, and love. That's self-giving. Heather and I were invited to go, and we met the Archbishop of Canterbury for Rowan Williams at an event, and I said to him, in our church we use this definition that you cultivation of sensitivity. He said, did I say that? He said, where is it? And I told him where it was. Oh, it's interesting. He said, I hadn't even realized what it is. But, that it is about that cultivation. In other words, cultivating spirituality. Everything that all church is supposed to be about, and all these things. Yoga means union. It is about creating union. It's all about this. It's about cultivating our connection to that which is essential in life. And through that connection, we experience joy. It's different from happiness. Happiness, happenstance, luck is involved. It's a life's work. First of all, there's the acceptance of the process, then the self-forgetting, then identifying with non-being, and the ability to have our attention out so that we can truly connect. You have to have your attention out to absolutely connect with that which is around us. So many people here in Aspen and around the valley say, I find God when I'm in nature. Yeah, because that's when they're connecting with that nature. They experience a connection with the mountains, with the beauty. They open themselves to the connection. And that connection with nature enables them to feel that connection with joy. Andrew Harvey says, the fundamental enemy, according to the ancient spiritual traditions, according to all the spiritual traditions, Buddhist, Hindu, Christian, Islamic, and indigenous, is the notion of a separate, false self that is diametrically opposed to the ancient wisdom of interrelationship, or as many today are naming it, interbeing. So when you have that connection, you experience that interbeing. He says our notion of perseity is formed by the trauma inherent in the industrial civilization, our conformity to convention, and the myriad forms of addictions that permeate the culture of modernity. In fact, he says, Western culture is the ultimate masterpiece of the journey into separation. It celebrates all the values that keep us partitioned and honors and rewards them luxuriously. And of course, when you've got separation, it's no wonder that people don't experience joy. Because they're making themselves separate, and joy is about together. And perseity is, that word he used, is having an existence or being that does not depend on other objects. And it is this emphasis on separateness that robs us of our joy, because joy is a function of connection. Rumi says, straddle the horse of joy. It is here the moment of our true reunion. The drum of the coming true promise is beating. The pathway to heaven is being swept. Your joy is now. It is here the moment, straddle the horse of joy. It is here the moment of your true reunion. And the key word is reunion. True reunion. And that is the source of joy. The joy comes from reunion, of connection. Which is why the whole direction of separateness, exclusivity, and exceptionalism that our world is full of at the moment is why we are being robbed of joy. Last page. Look at the faces of those who are joyful. They are faces of people who are connecting to others, to nature, to our world, to the divine reality. Which is why, actually when I got to this, oh dear, but which is why divine worship is so important. Worship, which means to give worth to. It's connecting. When you worship, you look outside yourself, which is why that is so important, because it creates that connection with the divine. Our hearts go out to the divine and we connect, and there is joy. And actually, we don't do enough of that in the chapel. I mean, we don't really do worship here. You go down to other churches, right? Yeah, all that's really, they're right, hands in the air, or, there's a sense of worship. We don't really do it here. Aspen Chapel's not really about all that sort of stuff. But we are. The only thing is it's so full of labels now, the whole aspect of worship. It's old labels of organs and hymns and all that means, or it's new labels of, evangelical worship. It's all got labels all over it. It's so difficult to approach the subject with, and that's why we don't, because, it just creates unhelpful thoughts and feelings. And we have to reclaim it. We have to reclaim that connection with the divine, which is why I'm going to be doing a series on worship later this year. Notice I'm not terribly specific about it, because I think, perhaps I'll get out of it. But I think I'm going to do a series on worship later this year, so you can experience the joy of that. And it is something to enjoy. That's an interesting word, isn't it? To enjoy is to participate in joy. And in that enjoyment is a form of connection with whatever we're enjoying about our experience of joy. Enjoying my food, or whatever it is. Joy is the evidence of connection. And for us to have an undercurrent of joy in our lives, we have to connect with life. And that is the opposite of being self-involved. It is to go out to that which is around us. And as Maureen pointed out last week, to help those around us. That's why such joy in helping, because we're connecting when we help those around us. The connection brings not only joy, but connection also brings healing. It brings about the wholeness, which is the function of healing. Notice when people do the healing bit, they lay hands on each other for healing. Jesus always touches when he heals, and the healing comes from the connection. Joy is the evidence that we're connected. So be intentional about your joy. Be intentional about your acceptance of your non-being, and come out and connect with the world around you. That's what will give you joy. And next week, we're going to talk about the whole idea of living in joy. Absolutely wonderful, Yuval. It was so great to have you here. Thank you so much. That's great. Well, we always have an opportunity for you to come back at us of anything we've said or experienced. We always offer these ideas with a willingness to be wrong. And or you may have an experience you want to share, or an idea or something that's come to you. Sometimes we just have a moment of silence, which is completely okay as well. But does anybody feel prompted to say anything at all? Yes, thank you very much. Rob.
The skill of, I can't remember his name, with his hands on that keys is remarkable.
Yeah,
Joyful, yeah, connect. I just never gave much thought. You just listen, but to watch what he is doing is... And then how'd you get the piano in here?
Well, funny enough, I just to say that the thing is, because we're linked with the music festival, we have spotlight recitals every Thursday night here. The music festival bring in a piano for us for the whole time. So this is a brand new Steinway, absolutely brand new. Just literally, you're about the fifth person ever to play that, and they bring it in. They take our other one downstairs. And they do it takes about half an hour, the whole thing, and then it's all tuned every week and stuff like that. So for this period of time during the festival, we have, Le Boulet de le Chien, it's known in England. And it's a fantastic piano. But also, which is why we turned it round, because Yuval is playing. We wanted you all to be able to see just how skilled he was. So that's why we turned it around. So Yuval, you've taken over the events.
Well done, though.
Thank you very much. That's great. That's good.
Great message. I sort of love the way you said, well, once we get past all of our problems, then, then we can get on with the joy bit. And of course, in this separated sort of modern world, there are just so many people that are just bogged down permanently with their stuff, and so you have to release all those emergency brakes first before you can then start to move into through the door and so forth. Any quick hacks for, getting ready?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that we are privileged to be able to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, someone living in Gaza right now does not have the ability to do that. So it is a privileged place to be able to experience that. And people living in war zones and things like that. But joy does suddenly appear in those places when there's a connection is made, a look or something like that does happen. And I think there is, just for those of us that do have the privilege of being able to work on ourselves, who have the leisure, and all this sometimes, when it's difficult for us, it's always remembering that aspect of acceptance. Yeah. We should always fight in terms of, to get ourselves out of difficult circumstances, get ourselves out of abusive relationships. And, I'm really, it's so important that we do what we can to get ourselves into a place. But once we do that, then there is a need to accept. I think therapists are so important to help us in that. I've been in therapy myself, and I think it's a fantastic way of doing that. Yeah, more from Bruce.
A professor at Berkeley, Dr. Keltner, wrote a book called Awe back in 2021, and they did a huge study all over the world about what gives you a sense of awe, and they came up with sort of 8 buckets. The last one is like all other, but the top 7, if I think about, as I review through them, they all are about making some sort of connection. Yeah. And so he advises microdosing awe. In other words, once you understand it, you can start to sort of say, oh, how can I go find a little bit of awe to reconnect? And then, it gives me, it's like a catalyst, it's a spark, but, do we have with all those brakes on, can people, carry on?
Yeah, it's interesting because awe is a function of worship, isn't it? When you have awe, you actually come out of yourself. It's that great joke about, which everyone's heard, but it's the John Wayne, and he's playing the centurion in the crucifixion, a great story ever told, and he does his, surely this man is the Son of God, and the director says to John, can we have just a bit more awe in what you're saying? He goes, oh, surely this man is the Son of God. Anyway, that's fine. By the way, absolutely nothing. Anyway, the old joke's always the best. Yes, Linda, there we are. Fantastic.
I just wanted to mention that your message today is very similar to what David Brooks talked about yesterday at the Aspen Institute, reviewing the 75 years of the Aspen Institute and where they started, the humanism, the whole concept of that. And they have a project directly related to what you're talking about now called Weavers. And they're going all over the country, and maybe the world, I don't know, and looking for people that are making these connections in their community, and how important community is, and the actual connections that people are out there doing as sort of a beginning of this bigger thing that you can then internalize. So it was a beautiful presentation.
Well, thank you for saying that, and also bringing up that idea of community, because these gatherings, in churches and things like that, are one of the last places where community continues. You've got the senior centre developing, but the fact that we have a group of 50, 60, 70 people coming together every single week is a fantastic experience of connection. And, whatever we can do, we're lucky in Aspen. We have the Institute, which is a community in a sense. We have these little communities that arise and things like that. But that connection of community, commune, is so important. And thank you for mentioning that. And thank you for mentioning the Weavers thing. Thank you. Yeah.
Breath. Breath is the first connection, because once we have the connection with our breath, then we can move from that place. But we have to find that inner connection. Discover.
I mean, what an amazing connection that you've just made, of course. I mean, what you've just said in 2 sentences, is hugely important. And most of us are disconnected from our breath. Most of us, in meditation, it's all about your breath. But most of us, And they always say, when people are going off it, they say, breathe, breathe. And when we bring ourselves back to our breath, you're so right, we bring ourselves back to who we truly are. And we make that connection. You're going to need the microphone if you're going to say something else. Then we'll come back to Diane after that. Do you want to just quickly say something? And then we'll come back to Diane after that. Yeah.
I just want to say that once you get the connection, then you can allow the movement. And I do a program called Dance Alive, so you just allow. After you've connected, then you allow that movement to flow through you.
Yeah.
And then you're in the connection.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, and Diane.
Linda reminded me of how lucky we are to live here. Jim and I went to see Così fan tutte last night, the opera at the Wheeler Opera House. I was jumping out of my seat with joy. That orchestra and the singing was phenomenal. It was absolutely, I couldn't get over it. I couldn't get over it.
Yeah. Thank you. And you can really see the joy now, can't you? Absolutely fantastic. You absolutely brilliant. It's a round of applause. Yeah. Jessica over here. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Adding on to what you were saying about breath, it's so interesting how all of this connects to my acting work and to creativity. Because with acting, the first thing they talk about is breath and connection. You're connecting to your partner. It's all about your partner. And when you breathe, you can allow the creativity, the spirituality to flow between your partner. So I just think it's so interesting how acting, that it's the study of connection. And I'm literally doing what my parents are doing, but in a different form. It's hilarious. So I just think that's so cool, and just that being, I'm learning that in a different way, and I just think that's really awesome. And I just wanted to share.
Thank you. No, it's lovely.
Thank you.
Great. No.
I just want to piggyback on that, because Jessica and I were talking last night, and I hope you don't mind me saying this, I just think this is such a cool example. Jessica was wanting to do her voice and speech practice, but she also wasn't wanting to do it, and she came down, she had a moment, and she was like, all you have to do is just practice the practice. It's like it didn't have to be an amazing 40-minute session, it just had to be an attempt of practicing her practice. And so for me, my question is, for each one of us, what is your practice? What brings you joy? What is it? I know listening to the music this morning that I flipping need to play the piano. I used to, and I don't, and when I do, it brings me joy. But whatever it is, we need to really reconnect with what is it that brings you joy, and just practice your practice, even if it's a bit naff,
Thank you. No, it's great. Good. Thank you, everybody. So appreciate you being part of the conversation. Just moves us on. When I'm thinking about where we go with this, all these conversations take us. I can never write the next thing because the conversation is so much a part of that. And I really appreciate people being willing to express their joy and really just give us that sense of what it means. So thank you for that.